Julia walked through the streets of New York, absorbing the vibrant energy that the city exuded. The afternoon sun cast a golden glow over the skyscrapers, making the concrete feel almost warm beneath her bare feet. With the camera hanging around her neck, ready to capture fleeting moments, Julia's eyes danced between hurried faces and sparkling storefronts. People passed by, each immersed in their own worlds, and she wondered if any of them shared her insecurities. As she walked, a storefront caught her attention. Her reflection was distorted by the glass surface, and for a moment, Julia couldn't distinguish where the image of the store ended and hers began. The face looking back at her was not the one Julia had imagined. The reflection seemed heavier, sadder, as if it carried the weight of frustrations accumulated over the years. The image made her hesitate. "Is this who I am?" she thought, feeling a wave of insecurity wash over her. She stepped away from the window, trying to shake off the uncomfortable feeling. She remembered what her mother used to say, "You are more than an image, my dear. True beauty comes from within." But even so, her mother's voice felt distant now, buried under the critical voices that always echoed in her mind. Julia felt lost in a sea of beauty standards that seemed unattainable. She had tried to fit in, changing her hair, her makeup, even her clothing style, but deep down, there was always a part of her that felt inadequate. "Why can't I be like those models?" she murmured, running her fingers over the lens of her camera, as if that could bring her some comfort. She remembered the countless attempts to conform to the standards society imposed, and how that left her feeling desperate. Her past was a patchwork of experiences that didn't satisfy her. Each click of the camera seemed to echo her longing for acceptance, but also reminded her of her failures. A gentle breeze brought her back to the present, and with a deep sigh, Julia decided she needed a coffee. As she walked toward a small cafe she used to frequent, she spotted a street artist sitting in a corner, focused on his sketchbook. He seemed so absorbed in his art, with his pencil dancing across the page, that Julia couldn't help her curiosity. She approached slowly, watching every stroke he made. "Hi, that looks amazing," Julia said, unable to contain her enthusiasm. The artist looked up, revealing a deep, intense gaze. He smiled, a grin that seemed to light up his face. "Thank you. I'm just trying to capture a bit of the city's essence," he replied, his voice soft and relaxed. "Are you an artist too?" "I'm a photographer," Julia responded, a bit shyly. "But lately, I've been feeling a little lost about what I want to do." "I understand. Sometimes, art can be a reflection of who we are or what we're going through. The important thing is to stay true to yourself," the artist said, his eyes fixed on Julia as if he knew exactly what she was feeling. "It's easier said than done," she replied with a light laugh. But the laughter wasn't completely genuine. "I feel like I'm always trying to fit into something that isn't me. And what if you didn't have to fit in? What if you could just be?" He closed the notebook, giving Julia his full attention. "Art is a form of freedom. You can create whatever you want, however you want. No one can tell you it's wrong." His words resonated in Julia like an echo. "You seem to understand. Sometimes, I just feel so insecure. Like I don't have the right to create something that really matters." Everyone feels that way at some point. The secret is not to let those insecurities paralyze you. "Art can be a way to cope with it," he replied, his voice calm and encouraging. "I'm Mark, by the way." "And you?" "Julia," she said, feeling that there was something special about this encounter. "Have you always been a street artist?" "Yes, as long as I can remember. It's the only way I've found to express my truth. Art has saved me from many things," Mark said, looking at the notebook as if it were an old friend. "And you?" What brought you to photography? Julia hesitated, feeling vulnerability at the surface. I've always loved capturing moments, telling stories through images, but lately, I feel like I'm not telling the right story, like I'm not being authentic. Why don't you try capturing your own story, or the stories of the people around you? That can be liberating, Mark suggested, a glimmer of understanding in his eyes. Do you think that would work? Julia asked, intrigued. The idea of focusing on stories instead of patterns felt like a breath of fresh air. Of course, everyone has a unique story. The beauty is in the diversity of human experiences. Don't be afraid to be vulnerable. That might resonate the most with people, he said, making Julia feel a little lighter. Julia nodded slowly, Mark's words planting a seed of hope in her heart. Maybe I should try. I'm tired of feeling trapped by expectations that aren't mine. Then do it. Go and take those photos. And if you need someone to help you, I'll be around, Mark offered, a sincere smile lighting up his face. She smiled back, feeling an instant connection. Thank you, Mark. I really appreciate that. You've given me a new perspective. As she said goodbye, Julia felt that something had changed within her. The insecurities were still there, but now there was a spark of hope and a desire to explore her own artistic voice. The conversation with Mark had inspired her to look at the city and the people with new eyes, a new intention. And as she walked away, she took one last look at the artist, now absorbed in his sketchbook, and thought, maybe I can find my purpose in authenticity, not conformity. With that thought in mind, Julia left the cafe feeling a little lighter, a little more confident. The city was a vast universe of stories, and she was determined to capture them, one image at a time. Julia observed the streets of New York with a mix of admiration and apprehension. The city vibrated around her, a mosaic of sounds, lights, and movements. Each corner seemed to tell a story, but hers was still open, a draft in search of a theme. She wondered if she would ever find her place there, among those who seemed so self-assured, so confident in their paths. It was in a cozy cafe, where the aroma of fresh coffee mingled with the sweet scent of croissants, that Julia met Mark. He was sitting at a small table, a sketchbook in his hands, scribbling with a pencil that seemed to have a life of its own. His ability to capture the essence of the city in just a few strokes intrigued her. A desire to approach him took hold, and without thinking too much, Julia decided to strike up a conversation. "Hi, what are you drawing?" she asked, smiling shyly. Mark looked up, surprise quickly transforming into a warm smile. "Oh, just some ideas, you know? The city is full of inspiration. Every face that passes makes me think of a new story." He paused, observing Julia. "And you? What brings a photographer like you to a place like this?" "I'm trying to discover my own stories, I guess," Julia replied, hesitantly. "Sometimes, I feel like I can't capture what really matters." "Maybe you're trying to capture too much," Mark suggested, leaning slightly forward as if he wanted to share a secret. "The beauty is in the little things, in the subtleties. Often, the most powerful stories are hidden in the imperfections." His words echoed in Julia's mind. She had always sought perfection in her photos, but Mark seemed to suggest that true beauty lay in the complexities of life, in moments of vulnerability. Intrigued, she continued the conversation. "You're a street artist, right? What's it like living this way? Isn't it risky?" Julia asked, trying to understand how he viewed life. "Risky? Maybe, but it's also liberating. Art is a form of connection. When I paint or draw, I'm not just creating something, I'm communicating. People stop, look, and sometimes share their own stories with me. That's more valuable than any sale I could make, Mark replied, his eyes shining with passion for his art. Julia felt drawn to his confidence. It was as if he had found a purpose, something she was still searching for. I'd love to experience that. Could you show me what that artistic routine is like? Of course. Let's go. I would love to have you with me, Mark said, with contagious enthusiasm. You'll see that the city is an open-air gallery. Get ready to be amazed. So, Julia found herself following Mark through the streets, which seemed to come alive beneath their feet. He guided her through alleys and squares, stopping in front of vibrant murals that told stories of resistance and hope. Each spray of paint, each stroke, revealed a narrative she had never noticed before. Look at this mural, Mark said, pointing to a massive piece of art depicting a woman with a wide smile and bright eyes. This is a tribute to the women who fight against society's imposed beauty standards. The artist used her own body as a model. What do you think? Julia looked at the mural, feeling a wave of emotions. It's incredible. I wish I could capture something like that in my photos. But how? I've always worried about showing only what is beautiful. That's the key, Julia. Beauty lies in authenticity. When you take photos of people being real, you can capture their essence, Mark explained, his expression serious. Let's do a little test. I want you to take a picture of me right now, without making me pose or prepare. Just capture the moment. Julia hesitated, but picked up her camera and looked at Mark, who turned slightly, letting himself be carried away by the rhythm of the city. She pressed the button, and in that instant, she felt a connection with what she was doing. The photo wasn't perfect, but it captured his essence, the confidence, the passion for art, and a lightness that Julia wished for herself. See, this is more than just a pretty image, Mark said, looking at the photo. You captured a moment, a feeling. This is art. His words touched her deeply. She began to understand that art didn't need to be a reflection of an ideal beauty, but rather a celebration of individuality and the stories each person carries. They continued their stroll, visiting other places. They stopped at a square where street performers were playing guitar and dancing. Mark started chatting with some of them, and Julia watched, fascinated. He moved with the ease that left her in awe. He blended into that atmosphere as if he was born to be there. Look, you can do this too. Come join us. One of the musicians shouted, laughing and inviting Julia to come closer. Me? No. I'm just a photographer, Julia replied with a shy smile. But photography is as powerful a form of art as music or painting. You should allow yourself to be part of this community, Mark said, encouraging her. His words resonated in her mind as she captured those moments with her camera. She began to see people in a new way, not just as objects to be clicked, but as human beings full of stories, struggles, and triumphs. With each photo, Julia felt she was breaking free from the chains binding her to a rigid concept of beauty and success. By the end of the day, as they walked back, Julia couldn't help but comment on the experience. You know, I've never thought about art this way. To me, it was something I had to master, control, but now, it seems like it's more about letting go and connecting with people. Mark smiled, satisfied. Exactly. Art should be a dialogue, an exchange. When you open yourself up to that, you'll discover that you have so much more to offer than you realize. Julia looked at him, feeling grateful to have found someone who inspired her to see the world in a new light. Thank you, Mark. This day was transformative. And this is just the beginning. The city is full of stories waiting to be told. Shall we explore more next weekend? He suggested, a sparkle in his eyes. Absolutely. I can't wait, Julia replied, excited. As she walked back home, Julia felt a wave of confidence growing within her. Art was not just about capturing what was perfect, it was about telling stories, celebrating the uniqueness of each person, and, more importantly, it was about the journey of self-discovery that she was just beginning. That night, Julia sat at her desk, surrounded by her photos and notes, reflecting on what she had learned. The idea of creating a new photography series began to take shape in her mind, a series that would celebrate diversity and stories of acceptance. Even though the journey would be challenging, she was determined to continue exploring and capturing the beauty of the world around her, one click at a time. The sun was beginning to set, painting the New York sky with orange and lilac hues, as Julia headed to a community art event that promised to be inspiring. With each step, her heart raced faster, a mix of anxiety and excitement bubbling inside her. The city seemed to vibrate, full of life and expression, and she felt a bit out of place but determined to find her spot. Upon arriving at the venue, a small gallery in a bohemian neighborhood, Julia was welcomed by a vibrant atmosphere. The walls were adorned with artworks that told stories of overcoming and resilience, each more impressive than the last. She let herself be swept away by the energy around her, admiring the passion emanating from each piece. It was then that her eyes landed on Clara, a woman with short, colorful hair, standing on a small stage set up for speeches and presentations. Clara had a magnetic presence, and Julia felt immediately drawn to her confidence. As she began to speak, the room fell silent, all eyes on her. "Hi, my name is Clara," she started, with a warm smile. "Today, I want to talk about acceptance. Acceptance of our bodies, of who we are, of our struggles and victories. It's not easy, but it's essential." Julia felt a flutter in her stomach. Clara's words seemed to resonate with her own internal struggle. She, who had long grappled with her insecurities and attempts to fit in, now saw herself reflected in Clara's experiences. The activist continued, sharing her own story of overcoming obstacles, how she had faced criticism and challenges, but always fought to accept herself as she was. "I used to look in the mirror and only see imperfections. But over time, I learned that true beauty lies in our experiences, in the stories we carry," Clara said, as the room erupted in enthusiastic applause. "Every scar, every mark, is a testament to our journey. And that is beautiful." Julia felt tears welling in her eyes. Clara's words were a balm to her soul. She remembered all the times she had looked at her own reflection and only seen what she disliked. "Why didn't I think of this before?" she thought, feeling a lightness she hadn't felt in a long time. After the presentation, Julia approached Clara, her steps hesitant but determined. "Hi, I'm Julia. Your speech was amazing," she said, with a shy smile. "Thank you. I'm glad you liked it," Clara replied, her gaze warm and welcoming. "You're an artist, right? I saw you admiring the artwork. What do you do?" "I'm a photographer," Julia replied, the passion starting to shine in her eyes. "I'm trying to find my own style and focus. Sometimes I feel lost about what I want to express." "Oh, that search is part of the creative process. Art should reflect who we are, our experiences, and how we see the world," Clara said, with contagious enthusiasm. "What have you been photographing?" "I was thinking about capturing the beauty of the people around me, but in a way that challenges conventional beauty standards," Julia replied, hesitantly. "But I'm still not sure how to do that." Clara smiled, a sparkle in her eyes. "That's wonderful. Acceptance and diversity are such powerful themes. Have you considered photographing people who have also faced challenges related to self-image? Having those stories in your art can be transformative. Clara's words ignited a flame within Julia. She began to envision the possibilities, the idea of capturing not just faces, but also stories. This could be something really special, she murmured, excitement growing. Yes, and I can help you, Clara offered, her voice full of enthusiasm. We can connect you with some people who have incredible stories to tell. I'm excited just thinking about what you can create. Julia felt her heart race. Being able to work with Clara, someone so inspiring, felt like a sign from the universe. This would be amazing. I would love to, she said, already thinking about how this could shape her project. After discussing the idea further, Clara invited her for coffee in the coming weeks so they could talk more about the stories that could be told through photography. Julia accepted gratefully, feeling increasingly confident in her journey. In the following days, Julia couldn't get Clara out of her mind. The activist had ignited a spark within her, making her realize that her art could be more than just beautiful images. It could be a vehicle for stories, for acceptance, and for diversity. With this new perspective, Julia began to prepare for her work. She envisioned the people she wanted to photograph, those who had faced struggles, those whose stories deserved to be told. She wanted to capture the beauty and imperfections in the life experiences that shape each individual. Finally, the day for coffee arrived. Julia was nervous but excited. Upon entering the small establishment, she encountered Clara, who greeted her with a warm hug. "Hi, Julia. It's so good to see you. I'm so eager to talk about your ideas," Clara said, animated. "Hi, Clara. I'm excited too. I've thought a lot about what you said. I want to focus on people who have stories of struggle and acceptance," Julia explained, her eyes shining with enthusiasm. "Great, that's an important step. A friend of mine, for example, went through a battle with anorexia and now helps others accept themselves. She would be a great story for you to capture," Clara suggested, while Julia listened attentively. "Yes, that would be amazing. I think her story could resonate with many people," Julia replied, already jotting down notes in her notebook. "Could you put me in touch with her?" "Of course. I'll pass along the information. And there's also a support group that meets every week. You could go and learn more inspiring stories," Clara continued, her excitement contagious. The conversation flowed naturally, and Julia felt that every word from Clara was guiding her toward a path she didn't know she needed to follow. With each story shared, her determination grew. She was about to embark on a journey that would not only change her perspective, but also that of many people around her. "I really want my photo series to show that each of us is unique and that our struggles make us who we are," Julia declared, feeling the passion in every word. "That's so powerful, Julia. Acceptance begins with understanding that we are all different, and that's wonderful. I'm so excited to see what you will create," Clara replied, a sparkle in her eyes. As they talked, Julia realized that although she still had insecurities, there was a new strength within her. With Clara by her side, she was determined to capture the beauty of diversity and celebrate every story that crossed her path. And so, Julia began her journey of self-discovery, armed with a new perspective and the determination to make her art speak for those who, like her, felt lost in their insecurities. The idea of creating a photographic series that celebrated the uniqueness of people became her mission, and she knew she was on the right path. Julia walked through the vibrant streets of New York, her gaze attentive to every detail of the city pulsating around her. The sunlight reflected in her eyes, but behind her smile, there was a whirlwind of insecurities. Since she started her artistic journey, The struggle against beauty standards and the quest for an authentic identity consumed her. When she met Mark, the street artist, she felt something inside her beginning to change. He inspired her, showing that art could be a form of connection and genuine expression. After a few weeks exploring the city with Mark, Julia decided she needed to take a step further. She wanted to capture the essence of the people around her, their struggles and triumphs, and thus the idea for her new photographic series was born. However, she knew she needed a starting point and decided that she should interview people with inspiring stories to tell. One day, while walking through Central Park, Julia spotted a group of people gathered around an artist who was drawing. Curious, she approached and soon realized it was a community event where local artists showcased their work. The atmosphere was filled with laughter and animated conversations. There, she found the perfect opportunity to start her series. "Hello, can I join you?" Julia asked, with a shy smile. A woman with curly hair and a warm smile, wearing a t-shirt that said "Love Your Body," turned to her. "Of course. I'm Clara, and we're here discussing art and acceptance. Are you an artist too?" "I'm actually a photographer. I'm starting a series about the beauty of people's stories," Julia replied, excitedly. "That's wonderful," Clara exclaimed. Body acceptance is such an important issue. Often, people don't see the beauty that exists in their own stories. Julia watched Clara as she spoke with passion. The activist had a magnetic presence that made her want to hear more. As the event wrapped up, Julia approached again. "I would love to talk more about this if you have some time. I'm looking for people to interview and photograph for my project." Clara smiled, noticing the sincerity in Julia's eyes. "Yes, of course. I'm always willing to help. We can meet for coffee, and I can share my story and some tips on how to approach this topic." The following days were filled with anticipation. Julia could hardly wait to meet with Clara. On the designated day, they gathered at a cozy cafe in Brooklyn, where soft light streamed through the windows, creating a warm atmosphere. "So, Julia, what brought you here?" Clara asked, stirring her coffee. "I've always been passionate about photography, but in recent years, I felt trapped in a mold that wasn't mine. I used to worry more about what people thought than about the message I wanted to convey," Julia replied, her eyes shining with sincerity. "Discovering Mark's art made me realize that I could use my camera to tell real stories, to capture the beauty in imperfections." Clara nodded, understanding Julia's struggle. "It's tough, right? Society puts us in boxes and expects us to fit in. But true beauty lies in authenticity. I went through a journey of acceptance myself." Julia was intrigued. "Can you tell me more about that?" Clara took a deep breath, as if recalling a difficult moment. "Of course. When I was younger, I struggled with my image. I always felt inadequate, especially regarding my weight. I thought I needed to change to be accepted. But over time, I realized I was just drifting away from the person I really am." "How did you make that transition?" Julia asked empathetically. "It was a process. I started surrounding myself with people who supported me and who were also going through similar struggles. Together, we learned to celebrate our differences. And then I decided I needed to use my voice to help others accept themselves too." Julia was enchanted. Clara's story resonated deeply within her, and the idea of capturing that authenticity motivated her even more. "Would you like to be one of the first people I photograph for my series?" Julia asked, her eyes sparkling. Clara smiled, her smile lighting up the room. "I would love to. I think my story can help others feel less alone." In the following days, Julia began preparing for her interviews and photo sessions. She decided she wanted to approach people in a way that showed not only their struggles but also their victories and the acceptance they found along the way. To do this, she prepared a list of questions to help draw out the best from each story. On the first day of interviews, Julia decided to start with Clara. They met in a park, where sunlight filtered through the leaves, creating a perfect backdrop. Julia set up her equipment while Clara paced nervously back and forth. "Are you ready?" Julia asked, adjusting the camera. "A little nervous, actually," Clara admitted, laughing nervously. "But I'm excited too. Don't worry, we'll do this together. Just be yourself." Clara nodded, and as the photo shoot began, Julia guided her to move and relax. The first photos were more tense, but as Clara started to loosen up, the beauty of her authenticity began to shine through. Julia captured every laugh, every expression of vulnerability and strength. "Now, let's talk a little about your story," Julia said, adjusting the camera angle. "What would you like to share?" Clara began to speak about her childhood, her insecurities, and the pressures she felt to fit in. As she spoke, Julia noticed how Clara transformed in front of the camera. The sparkle in her eyes and the passion in her voice were contagious. "I always thought I needed to change to be loved, but in reality, true acceptance began when I learned to love myself as I am," Clara said sincerely. "Artists helped me express that." "That's beautiful, Clara. I want to capture that essence in your photos." After the session, Julia sat with Clara on a park bench, both relaxed and smiling. "You inspired me a lot today," Julia said. "Not just with your story, but with your courage to show yourself like this." "And you inspired me to open up," Clara replied. "I believe your art can make a difference." In the days that followed, Julia continued her interviews, capturing the essence of each person she met. She met a young man who had overcome a serious illness, a woman who rediscovered herself after a divorce, and an elderly man who shared his life memories. Each story was a mosaic of struggle, love, and acceptance. In one of her sessions, Julia met an elderly man named Carlos. He was sitting on a bench in a park, watching the children play. As she approached, Julia noticed the lines of expression on his face, each one telling a story. "Hello, may I take some photos of you? I'm working on a project that celebrates the beauty of life stories," Julia said gently. Carlos looked at her, surprised, but nodded his head. "Sure, young lady. I've always liked being photographed. But know this, my story isn't that simple." Julia smiled, intrigued. "I would love to hear your story if you feel comfortable sharing it." Carlos began to speak, and Julia adjusted her camera, capturing every expression that reflected his emotions. "I've lived through many things. Life isn't easy for those who lived through the war. I lost friends, loves, but believe me, every pain taught me something. The beauty of life lies in resilience." She was moved by his words and asked, "What do you think is most important in life?" "To love and be loved. Acceptance comes when you understand that every scar is a part of who you are," Carlos replied, with a profound look. Julia felt she was capturing not just images, but the soul of each person. The project was taking shape, and as her photographs accumulated, she began to realize that she was not only documenting her stories, but also healing herself in the process. However, the resistance from some friends started to emerge. They didn't understand Julia's new focus and often questioned her artistic choices. Nevertheless, that didn't stop her. She was determined to follow her heart and show the world the beauty she had found. Julia was sitting at a cafe table, the aroma of roasted beans mingling with the air, as she looked at her laptop. The cursor blinked on the blank screen, but her ideas seemed as distant as the clouds covering the city. The excitement of her new photographic series still pulsed in her heart, but insecurity began to take over her mind. It was hard to ignore the critical voices that grew louder each day. That afternoon, she had arranged to meet some friends to discuss her work. Initially, she was anxious and full of hope, but as the day went on, a shadow of doubt began to gnaw at her. What would they think? How would they react to her new artistic focus, which was different from what she used to do? Julia's vision was clear, but the pressure to please others made her hesitate. When she arrived at the small studio that her friends used as a meeting point, the atmosphere was filled with laughter and lively conversations. The vibrant energy contrasted with the storm brewing inside her. She greeted each of them, but at the same time, felt a lump in her throat. What should have been a moment of joy was about to turn into a test of her courage. "Hey, Julia, I'm so glad you came," said Anna, one of her closest friends, with a wide smile. "We were just talking about what everyone has been up to." "Hi, everyone. I brought some prints of my new photos," Julia replied, trying to keep her voice steady. She sat down and distributed the copies to everyone. This series is about acceptance and the beauty of imperfections. The friends began to flip through the images, and as the conversation flowed, Julia observed the expressions on their faces. At first, everything seemed fine, but soon Anna furrowed her brow. "Julia, I don't know. These photos are really different from what you used to do. Do you really think this is the right path?" The question was thrown like a stone into the sea of enthusiasm Julia was trying to maintain. "Yeah, I agree with Anna," intervened Lucas, a friend who had always been critical. "You had such a strong brand with your previous work. Wouldn't it be better to stick with the style that already brought you success?" Julia felt a knot in her stomach. "But, guys, this is what I want to do now. I'm trying to explore what it means to be authentic. What I did before doesn't represent me anymore. But you know the market is cruel, right? People want something that sells, something they already know. This series may not have the same appeal," Lucas said, his tone sounding more like an admonishment than a suggestion. Discouraged, Julia looked at the photos again, trying to find comfort in the images she had captured. They showed real people, with their marks, their stories, and their struggles. But what if this is the truth I need to tell? What happened to the idea of supporting diversity and acceptance? She asked, raising her voice a little more than she intended. The discussion began to intensify, and voices overlapped. Anna tried to soften the conversation, but Lucas kept insisting. "Julia, you need to understand that art is also a business. You need financial return. I'm not saying you shouldn't do what you love, but maybe you should think more about how this will be received." Julia felt tears welling up in her eyes, frustration overwhelming her. "I don't want my art to be reduced to a sale. I want people to feel something, to see themselves in my photos. And can't you do both?" Anna asked, trying to find a middle ground. "You can have a powerful message and still not lose the connection to what has already worked." The conversation left her exhausted. It was as if each word had been a stab, and Julia needed time to process everything. At the end of the meeting, she quickly said goodbye, forcing a smile, but her heart was heavy. Walking through the streets of New York, the bright lights of the city became a blur. Doubt followed her like a shadow. She decided to go to the park where she used to meet Mark. He always had a way of seeing her and giving her advice that made her feel stronger. When she arrived, she found him sitting on a bench, sketching in his notebook, focused. Julia sat down beside him, and concern quickly took over his face. "Hey, Julia, you look worried. What happened?" Mark asked, closing the notebook and looking into her eyes. "I had a meeting with some friends. They're not excited about my new photo series. They believe I'm straying from what worked before Julia vented, feeling the anguish spill out. Mark watched her for a moment, absorbing her words. Sometimes, people are afraid of the new. They prefer what they already know, even if it no longer represents who you are. But you have to follow your heart, Julia. Your art is your voice, and it should be authentic. It's easy for you to say. You already have that confidence. I just don't know if I'm good enough to tell these stories, Julia said, her voice choked. Look, being vulnerable isn't a weakness. It's a strength. The best stories come from the deepest place within us. Never forget that, he replied sincerely. And if you don't tell these stories, who will? His words touched her deeply. Julia knew she was in a moment of transition, where her insecurities and the need for validation clashed with the desire to be true to herself. I just don't want to disappoint anyone, you know? I don't want people to see me as a fraud. If you don't see yourself as a fraud, then you're not. Art is subjective, and you can't please everyone. What matters is that you're doing something that makes sense to you. And if that resonates with others, great. If not, you're still being true, Mark said, with an encouraging look. You're right. I just need the courage to show my work, Julia said, feeling a new wave of determination. Why not organize an exhibition? Show the world what you truly believe in. People deserve to see it, Mark suggested, with a smile. The idea began to germinate in Julia's mind. An exhibition could be the perfect opportunity to share her vision and passion. I can do this. I can organize an exhibition and show how beauty manifests in different forms and stories, she said, with a new sparkle in her eyes. That's right, and I would love to help. We can create something amazing together, Mark replied, excited. With a lighter heart and a mind full of new possibilities, Julia began to imagine what her exhibition could be. The conversations and criticisms that had discouraged her now seemed less significant. What mattered was that she was ready to take a step forward in her journey, embracing her authenticity and the beauty of the stories she wanted to tell. Thank you, Mark. I really needed this, Julia said, with gratitude. I'm always here for you, Julia. Let's do this together, he replied, with a sincere smile. As they talked, the city continued its vibrant dance around them, but Julia felt she had found a new path, one that not only connected her with her art, but also with the stories that truly mattered. Life was full of uncertainties, but for the first time in a long time, she felt she was moving in the right direction. Julia was in her studio, surrounded by photographs, papers, and pens. The day of the exhibition was approaching quickly, and every minute felt like a mix of anxiety and excitement. The smell of fresh coffee filled the air, but the aroma that truly enveloped her was that of possibility. It was the first time her works would be displayed at an event that meant so much to her. It wasn't just a collection of photos. It was the culmination of a journey of self-discovery, a cry for acceptance and authenticity. As she organized her photos, Julia couldn't help but think about how long it had taken to get there. The images she captured spoke of the struggles and triumphs of real people, each reflecting a story of pain and beauty. She remembered the deep conversations she had with each subject of her lens, the vulnerability that was laid bare as the cameras clicked. Now, all of this would be shown to the world. Julia, Mark's voice echoed through the studio, interrupting her thoughts. He entered with a wide smile, bringing with him contagious energy. How are you feeling? Is everything ready for the big night? I'm excited and nervous at the same time, she admitted, running her hands through her hair. I just hope people understand what I'm trying to convey with these photos. They will, trust me. Your art speaks for itself, Mark said, leaning against the table. He looked at one of the most striking photos in the series, a portrait of a woman smiling, with visible scars on her face. This one is powerful. Can you feel her story? Yes, every time I look at her, I feel a connection, Julia replied, her heart racing. She told me about what she went through and how she learned to accept her appearance. It's a testament to human strength. And that's what you're doing, Julia. You're capturing human strength. True beauty lies in authenticity, and you're bringing that to light. Mark encouraged her, starting to help organize the photos for the exhibition. Julia smiled, feeling a bit more confident. Thank you, Mark. Your support means a lot to me. We're in this together. Don't forget that. He winked, and Julia couldn't help but laugh. Their friendship had grown stronger over the months, and Mark's support was a light amidst her insecurities. With Mark's help, the afternoon flew by. They worked together on the final details of the exhibition, discussing the best way to arrange the photos, what lighting to use, and how to create an environment that reflected the essence of her message. Every decision was meticulously thought out, and Julia felt more and more excited as the day went on. Finally, as evening approached, Julia and Mark finished the preparations. The space was ready, the walls adorned with the photographs Julia had captured. She paused for a moment, looking around, and felt a wave of emotion. It was real. The exhibition was about to happen. On opening night, you're going to shine, Mark said, noticing the look of apprehension on her face. People will be there to hear you and see your vision. I just hope I don't freeze up when it's time to speak, Julia confessed, biting her lower lip. That's not going to happen. You're an artist, Julia. You have a story, and people want to hear it. Just speak from the heart, he encouraged her again, his gaze serious yet kind. That night, as the lights dimmed and the space filled with guests, Julia felt her heart race. Soft music filled the air, and people chatted animatedly. She was dressed simply yet elegantly, in a black dress that highlighted her personal style. The excitement mixed with anxiety, but she knew she had to stay strong. Look, there's Clara and some of my friends, Mark pointed out, causing Julia to turn around. She waved to Clara, who was surrounded by a group of people, eager to share her message about acceptance and diversity. Clara's presence was a reminder of what had inspired her throughout her journey. Come on, you can do it, Mark whispered encouragingly, giving her a gentle push. Julia took a deep breath and started moving toward the group. Hi, Clara. I'm so happy you came, Julia exclaimed as she approached. Of course. I can't wait to see your photos. They're amazing, Julia, Clara replied with a radiant smile. Thank you. It means so much to me to have you here. Your message really inspired me to move forward with this series, Julia said, feeling a warmth in her heart. And you're doing a wonderful job. People need to see these stories, Clara asserted, her voice full of passion. The conversation flowed, and as time passed, Julia felt more confident. People began to gather around the photographs, and compliments started to emerge. This image is incredible. How did you manage to convey so much emotion? A guest commented, admiring a photo of a young street artist. I talked a lot with him. He shared his story of struggle and overcoming challenges, and that helped me capture his essence, Julia replied, excited by the positive reaction. You really have a unique talent, another guest praised. These photos are more than just images. They are windows into the souls of people. Julia felt her heart warm with the words of support. She had worked so hard to get to this point and was finally being recognized for her effort. When it was time for her speech, Julia felt butterflies in her stomach. With a determined look, she stepped onto the small stage set up for the occasion. The lights turned toward her, and the room fell silent. Hi, everyone. My name is Julia, and I'm so happy you're here tonight," she began, her voice slightly trembling but full of emotion. "These photographs represent the journey I took to find my own voice as an artist. Each image here tells the story of someone who challenged the standards of beauty and acceptance that often surround us." She looked at the audience, her gaze catching the expressions of interest and support. "I've realized over time that true beauty comes from within. It's not about fitting into a mold, but about accepting who we are, with all our imperfections and uniqueness." Julia felt more at ease as she spoke, her passion for art and acceptance shining through in every word. "I want to thank all the models who were willing to share their stories with me. You are the true inspiration behind this series." A soft applause began to spread through the room, and Julia felt a wave of gratitude. "I hope this exhibition can spark conversations and reflections on the beauty of diversity and acceptance. May we all support and celebrate our differences." With a genuine smile, Julia concluded her speech. "Thank you for being here and for being part of this journey with me." Applause echoed through the room, and Julia's heart raced. She stepped down from the stage, feeling light and accomplished. The looks of admiration she received from the guests made her feel like she was exactly where she needed to be. The night was just beginning, and Julia knew that, regardless of what happened next, she had found her voice and her mission. The atmosphere of the exhibition was electric, pulsing with the vibrant energy of the diversity that Julia had captured in her photographs. The walls of the industrial warehouse were adorned with images of faces that told stories of struggle, resilience, and acceptance. Each portrait, each word in the description, was a testament to the lives Julia had encountered during her journey. It was a culminating moment, and she was nervous but excited. Julia stood in a corner of the space, watching people approach the photographs, chatting in animated whispers. The smell of fresh coffee mingled with the faint aroma of paint, and the soft music playing in the background created a welcoming ambience. Meanwhile, Clara, the activist who had become a close friend, was preparing for her presentation. Julia looked at her, admiring the confidence Clara displayed. "Are you ready?" Clara asked, adjusting the microphone she held. "I am, but a little nervous," Julia admitted, biting her lip. "What if people don't understand my vision?" Clara smiled, her eyes shining with encouragement. "Julia, you are telling stories that need to be heard. Your art is powerful because it comes from the heart. Remember that." With one last supportive glance, Clara stepped up to the small makeshift stage. The crowd quieted down, and all eyes turned to her. Clara began to speak, her voice firm and clear. "Good evening, everyone. It's an honor to be here with you today, in a space that celebrates authenticity and diversity." She gestured toward the photographs. "These images are not just portraits. They are testimonies of lives that are often silenced. They are stories of acceptance, struggle, and self-love." The audience listened intently, some with emotional expressions. Clara continued, "Body acceptance is not just about appearance. It's about recognizing the beauty that exists in each of us, regardless of the standards imposed by society. Each of us carries our own battles, and those battles shape us." As Clara spoke, Julia remembered the conversations she had with the people she photographed. She recalled how each of them had opened up, sharing their insecurities and victories. Those moments were the fuel for her art, and now she saw how everything connected in that space. Today, we're not just here to admire the art. We're here to discuss what it means to be authentic in a world that often tries to shape us. Breaking these patterns is a tough journey, but it's a journey worth taking, Clara concluded, looking directly at Julia, an encouraging smile on her face. The applause echoed through the warehouse, and Julia felt a wave of gratitude. Clara had a magical way of touching people, and her message resonated deeply. The artist knew that the presentation was not just about her, but about everyone who had contributed to the photographic series. After Clara finished, Julia stepped onto the stage, a bit hesitant. The microphone felt heavy in her hands, but she took a deep breath and began to speak. "Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. When I started this journey, I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but I knew I needed to explore the beauty that exists in human diversity. These photos represent people who challenge conventional beauty standards and who, through their stories, teach us to accept and love our imperfections." Julia looked at the crowd and saw faces that encouraged her. Each portrait here was built with love and respect. I was inspired by every story I heard. Each person I photographed taught me something valuable about looking at life and ourselves in a kinder way. She paused, capturing the gaze of an elderly woman in the audience, whose trembling hands held a handkerchief. When I met people like Ms. Margarita, who has a life story filled with challenges, I realized that beauty is not a matter of youth or magazine standards. It shines through our experiences and triumphs. Julia felt the emotion rising but struggled to keep her voice steady. And that's what I hope to convey with my work, that we can see beyond the surface and celebrate the uniqueness that each of us brings to the world. The audience applauded again, and Julia felt a wave of relief and pride. As she stepped off the stage, she was immediately enveloped in hugs and greetings. People were moved, and some even shared their own stories of struggle and acceptance. "You really touched our hearts," said a young woman with tears in her eyes. "Your photos made me see that I'm not alone." Julia smiled, warmth spreading in her chest. "That's what I hope for, that we can come together through our stories." While she was talking to the visitors, Mark approached her, a big smile on his face. "You rocked it up there, Julia. Your authenticity is contagious." "Thank you, Mark," she said, feeling lighter. "I couldn't have done it without the support of you and Clara." "Speaking of Clara," Mark said, looking at the stage, where Clara was receiving applause and hugs. "She really knows how to inspire people, doesn't she?" "Yes," Julia agreed, watching Clara interact with the audience. "She is a force of nature." Suddenly, Mark caught Julia's attention, pointing to a mural he had created at the back of the space. "Look at this. I made something special for your exhibition." Julia turned around, and her heart raced at the sight of the mural. It was an explosion of colors and shapes, a vibrant representation of the stories she had captured. There were faces, flowers, and elements symbolizing acceptance and self-love. At the center, a powerful phrase, "Beauty is the sum of our stories." "Mark, this is amazing," Julia exclaimed, her eyes shining. "You perfectly captured the spirit of the exhibition. I wanted people to see that art is a conversation." "And you started that conversation with your photographs," he replied, his gaze serious yet affectionate. As the evening progressed, the space filled with voices, laughter, and tears. The event was transforming into a true space for dialogue, where visitors shared their own stories of struggle and triumph. Julia felt moved to see how her art had touched so many lives. A woman approached, with an intense look. "I don't know how to thank you. Your photos helped me accept my own body, which I have always hated. Today, I'm wearing something I would have never had the courage to wear before." Julia smiled, feeling a wave of empathy. "That's wonderful. You are beautiful just the way you are." The woman smiled back, and the two shared a hug. This moment repeated itself several times, and Julia realized that her art was more than just images. It was a bridge connecting people. As the night came to a close, Clara joined Julia and Mark, the three exchanging smiles and hugs. This was a magical night, Clara said, happiness in her voice. I knew your art would make a difference, Julia. Thank you for everything, Clara. Your presence and support were crucial, Julia replied, her heart full of gratitude. Mark then looked at Julia and said, You are an incredible artist. Don't doubt the impact you have. Julia looked into their eyes, feeling stronger than ever. You both helped me find my voice. Let's continue this journey together and explore even more stories. With a sense of hope pulsing in her heart, Julia realized that the journey was just beginning. She had found her community, a group that not only embraced her art, but also inspired her to become the best version of herself. The illuminated night in New York, filled with laughter, tears, and stories, would be etched in her memory as a milestone in her journey of self-discovery. After the exhibition, Julia sat at her small work desk in her apartment located in a vibrant neighborhood of New York. The space was filled with hanging photographs and scattered cameras, reflecting her life as an artist. Her heart still pulsed with the energy of the night before as she reviewed the messages that began arriving on her phone. Each notification felt like a small gift, a confirmation that her work had touched people. She opened the first message, which was from a woman named Laura. Hi, Julia. I was at your exhibition yesterday and just wanted to say that your photos changed the way I see myself. Thank you for sharing these stories. Julia smiled, feeling warmth in her chest. This was exactly what she had hoped for, that her art would create connections and encourage acceptance. The messages kept coming, one after another. There were comments about how the photos captured not only the essence of the people, but also their stories of overcoming challenges and resilience. Julia felt like a bridge between those experiences and the world. Amidst all this, Mark entered the apartment, bringing with him the vibrant energy of the streets. Hey, artist, he exclaimed as he flopped onto the couch. How was the night? You looked like you were glowing. It was amazing, Mark. People were so open, so willing to share. I've never felt anything like it before, Julia replied, still absorbing the emotion that surrounded her. I knew it would be special, Mark said, flashing a smile that lit up his face. And I have to show you something. He pulled a notebook from his pocket and began to flip through it quickly until he found a specific page. Look, I made this inspired by your photos. It was a sketch of a mural, a composition full of colors and shapes that represented the diversity and beauty of the stories Julia had captured. It's beautiful, Mark. You really managed to capture the essence of what I felt while photographing those people. I want our art to come together. Let's create something together. How about it? Mark suggested, his eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. Absolutely. We can create a project that celebrates acceptance and diversity. Maybe even a joint exhibition, Julia replied, feeling excitement grow within her. As they talked about the possibilities, Clara called. Hi, Julia. I just wanted to congratulate you on the exhibition. I was so moved by what you did. Thank you, Clara. Your talk really touched everyone, and I'm so happy to have you be a part of it, Julia said, feeling grateful for the connection she had made. I'm planning a new initiative, a workshop on body acceptance and diversity. I wanted to know if you would like to participate. We could work together on something that involves art and personal stories, Clara suggested. That would be amazing. I would love to help, Julia replied, already imagining how she could integrate her photography into Clara's project. Great. Let's meet to discuss this further. I'm really excited about the idea, Clara concluded, her voice brimming with enthusiasm. After the call, Julia and Mark continued discussing their ideas. Have you thought about how we can expand this? We could travel and capture stories of acceptance in different parts of the world, Mark suggested, looking at Julia with anticipation. This would be a transformative experience. Imagining all the people we could meet and the stories we could tell, Julia commented, her gaze distant, dreaming of the future. Let's make this a mission. A project that truly makes a difference, Mark said, taking Julia's hand. I think you should allow yourself to dream big. Weeks went by, and the creative energy between Julia, Mark, and Clara only grew. They frequently gathered to discuss the workshop and plan the body acceptance initiative. Julia was especially excited about the idea of exploring visual storytelling through her photography, while Clara brought a deep understanding of the importance of representation. I thought about including a section where people can share their own stories and experiences, Clara suggested in one of their meetings. This could help create a safe and welcoming space. That's perfect. Photography can be a powerful medium for these stories. Each image can tell a unique narrative, Julia agreed, already visualizing how she could capture those moments. Mark, always supportive, added, and we can create an interactive space during the workshop where people can draw or write their stories. That could be a very rich form of expression. As the planning progressed, Julia felt more confident each day. The idea of traveling and documenting stories of acceptance and diversity deeply motivated her. She was determined to make this happen, and at the same time, she was connecting more and more with her own story. One night, while reviewing her photos, Julia found an image that made her reflect on her own journey. It was a photograph of a woman who had struggled with accepting her body but had finally found her voice and asserted herself. Julia realized that, like that woman, she too was in a process of self-discovery. Mark, do you remember that woman we photographed in the park? The one who talked about how she learned to love herself? Julia asked, referencing one of the most impactful stories she had captured. Of course. She had an incredible energy. You could feel her strength, Mark replied, clearly recalling the moment. I want all the stories I tell to be a form of empowerment. I want people to see that it's possible to overcome their insecurities and celebrate who they truly are, Julia asserted, her determination clear in her eyes. That's what makes your art so special, Julia. You're not just capturing images. You're telling stories that need to be heard, Mark said, admiring the passion that radiated from her. Finally, the date of the workshop arrived. The space was welcoming, decorated with Julia's photographs and Mark's artwork. Clara was there, ready to welcome the participants. Welcome, everyone. We are so happy you are here. Today, we want to create a space where everyone feels safe to share their stories and celebrate diversity, Clara began, her voice full of warmth. Julia watched the people around her, each with their own story, and felt a flutter of nerves. She knew this was an important moment not only for the participants but also for her. The connection with these people would be a fundamental part of her artistic journey. The workshop began, and the stories started to flow. Julia and Mark moved around the space, documenting the moments, the laughter, and the tears. Each account was a piece of a larger puzzle that Julia was starting to understand. I want everyone to remember. Each of you is a work of art, unique and precious, Julia said during a pause, looking into the eyes of the participants. And that's what we want to celebrate here. As the day went on, people began to open up. Julia felt the energy of the space shift, a sense of acceptance and love emerging as stories were shared. It was a transformative experience, and Julia realized she was exactly where she was meant to be. Mark, beside her, whispered, "Look how they are connecting. This is magical." "Yeah, it's everything I've ever wanted. I'm so grateful we're doing this together," Julia replied, her heart overflowing with emotion. As the workshop neared its end, Clara proposed a final activity, a collaborative mural where everyone could express their stories and feelings. People began to gather, filled with enthusiasm, and Julia felt inspired to capture that moment. "Let's do this together. A mural that represents our journey and our stories," Clara said as everyone came together to paint and draw. Julia grabbed her camera and started clicking, capturing the radiant faces of all the participants, immersed in their creativity. The atmosphere was filled with joy and liberation, and as she looked at the mural taking shape, she felt a wave of gratitude. The day ended with hugs and smiles, and Julia realized she had created not just an artistic space, but a community. The messages she had received after the exhibition were now becoming a tangible reality. The stories she had captured were just the beginning of something much bigger. "This day was amazing, Julia. You did a wonderful job," Mark said as they helped clean up the space. "I couldn't have done it without you, Clara, and you, Mark." "I'm so excited for what comes next," Julia replied, feeling more connected than ever to her art and her mission. The idea of traveling and documenting stories of acceptance now seemed like a possible reality. With the energy of the community pulsing around her, Julia knew she was on the right path to becoming the artist she had always dreamed of being, and she was excited about what the future held. Julia was going through a phase of intense transformation. Following the successful exhibition of her photography series, which captured the essence of acceptance and diversity, her work began to gain recognition. People from different parts of the city were connecting with her art, and it was almost surreal for her to realize the impact her photos were having. Now, she was constantly being invited to talks and events, and the idea of sharing her journey with a larger audience filled her with both excitement and nervousness. It was a sunny morning when Julia arrived at the auditorium where she would be presenting. The walls were adorned with works from various local artists, creating a vibrant and inspiring atmosphere. The space was beginning to fill up, and she could hear the lively conversations echoing in the air. Julia took a deep breath and mentally prepared herself. She knew that this talk would be an opportunity not only to discuss her art, but also to share her story and that of everyone she had photographed. "Julia," a familiar voice called out to her. It was Clara, the body acceptance activist who had become a close friend since the community event. She approached with a wide smile on her face. "I'm so excited to see you here. Are you ready?" "Ready, but still nervous," Julia admitted, forcing a smile. "It's different from being behind the camera, you know? I understand. But remember, you're not alone. You have a powerful message to share. People need to hear it. And you have a unique way of telling those stories." Clara held Julia's hand, conveying confidence. "Thank you, Clara. That really means a lot to me." Julia felt a warmth in her heart knowing she had support. The talk began, and as she was called to the stage, Julia's nervousness intensified. She stepped onto the stage, and the audience's attentive gaze made her feel butterflies in her stomach. However, as she looked at the faces watching her, she realized they were people who cared about her words. With a steady voice, she began to recount her journey, from her personal insecurities to discovering her true artistic voice. "I always believed that art should adhere to conventional standards of beauty and success," Julia began, gesturing with her hands to emphasize her words. "But over time, I realized that true beauty lies in the uniqueness of each one of us. Through the stories I captured, I learned that every scar, every wrinkle, and every smile tells a story of struggle and triumph." The audience was engaged, and she could see some people nodding in agreement. The feeling of connection encouraged her to continue. "I believe that, as artists, We have the responsibility to give voice to those who typically do not have one. My series is a celebration of those voices. After her presentation, Julia felt relieved. The applause and smiles from the audience were evident. She had managed to convey her message and felt she had touched the hearts present. But, as in any journey, not everything would be perfect. During the question and answer session, a hand was raised in the crowd. A woman with short hair and a serious expression seemed eager to speak. "Julia, I thought your photos were amazing, but I can't help but wonder, do you really understand the stories you are telling? Do you have the right to portray the struggles of others if you haven't experienced it yourself?" The question hung in the air, and Julia felt her stomach churn. It was a direct criticism, and for a moment, the words wouldn't come. She looked at the woman, trying to gauge the intensity of her gaze. I understand that my experience is limited," Julia began, hesitantly, "but I strive to listen and learn from those I photograph. Every person I have met has trusted me with their stories and their truths. I see myself as a bridge, a way to bring these stories to a broader audience." The woman did not seem convinced. "But you can't really understand the pain and struggle of these people if you haven't lived it. Isn't it a form of appropriation?" The murmurs in the audience grew louder, and Julia felt the weight of everyone's gaze. Clara, who was sitting in the front, looked at her with a supportive expression, but Julia knew she needed to defend herself. "It's true. I can't claim to know the pain of everyone I've photographed, but what I do is a genuine effort to honor their stories. I listen, learn, and seek authenticity in representation. But what if you are distorting their reality?" The woman insisted, her voice raised. "What if you are just seeking your own validation through the suffering of others?" The words cut Julia like a knife. She looked at the audience, which was now divided. Some people were clearly supporting her, but others seemed hesitant, reflecting on the question raised. Julia felt a wave of insecurity, and everything she had built began to crumble in her mind. "I am not here to validate myself," she said, now more firmly, seeking to assert herself. "I am here to give visibility to struggles that are often ignored. My art is not about me, but about the stories that deserve to be told. I am not perfect, but I am learning and growing with each interaction." The woman seemed to relax a bit, but her expression was still critical. "I just hope you do this responsibly. Art can be a powerful way to tell stories, but it can also be harmful if not done with care." Julia nodded, acknowledging the validity of the viewpoint. "Thank you for raising that question. It's important that we continue this conversation and that I keep listening and learning. I promise I will do this with all the respect these stories deserve." The moderator intervened, thanking the woman for her question and moving on to the next one. But the unease that the question stirred stayed with Julia. As the event went on, she felt a bit lost, questioning whether she was truly qualified to tell the stories she loved so much. After the lecture, Julia left the auditorium, still reflective. The warmth of the sun hit her, but it couldn't warm the chill that had settled in her heart. Clara found her outside, with a worried expression. "Hey, you were amazing in there. Don't let one critique bring you down." "I know, Clara, but what if she's right? What if I'm just exploiting other people's pain for my own benefit?" Julia couldn't shake the weight of the doubts that plagued her. "Julia, you're an artist, not a therapist. You can't carry the weight of everyone's experiences. Your intent is genuine, and that's what matters. You're giving voice to those who are often unheard. Don't let a single opinion shake you." Julia took a deep breath, absorbing Clara's words. "You're right. I just need to remember why I started this journey." "Exactly. Every photo and every story has a purpose. Don't give up now. Clara smiled, encouraging her. As they walked toward the cafe where they would meet Mark, Julia reflected on what she had learned. Art was a field of challenges, and she was just beginning. It was important to have difficult conversations, like the one that happened during the lecture, and that would help her grow as an artist and as a person. Upon arriving at the cafe, Julia saw Mark sitting at a table, immersed in his sketchbook. His focused gaze conveyed a passion that always inspired her. When he spotted her, a smile lit up his face. "How was it?" he asked, his tone vibrant. "You killed it, right?" Julia hesitated before responding, still processing the critique she had received. "It was good, but there was a tough moment. A woman questioned whether I really had the right to tell the stories I photograph." Mark raised an eyebrow, his expression turning serious. "And what did you say?" "I tried to explain that my intent was to honor those stories, but that didn't seem sufficient for her. Now I'm wondering if I'm doing the right thing." "You are," Mark asserted firmly. "Every artist faces criticism, and it's natural to feel insecure. But what you do is important and necessary. You're impacting lives, and that's worth more than the opinion of one person." Julia smiled, feeling a little lighter. Talking with Mark always helped clear her mind. "Thank you, Mark. Your belief in me means a lot. Then let's move forward. What's next on your journey?" he asked, shifting to a more optimistic tone. Julia thought for a moment, feeling the excitement return. "I think I need to keep exploring these stories, maybe even give more talks. And who knows, collaborate with you on something bigger. That would be amazing," Mark replied, excited. "We can combine our arts and create a project that really makes a difference. The stories you've captured can be more than that." Julia sat on a park bench, her gaze lost in the leaves gently dancing in the wind. The day was clear, but her mind was shrouded in dark clouds. The recent exhibition had been a success, but the feedback, both constructive and destructive, still echoed in her head, like a persistent echo that wouldn't let her be. Beside her, Mark observed, attentive to her silences and nervous smiles. "Are you okay?" he asked, breaking the silence that stretched between them like a thin thread. His voice was soft but filled with concern. Julia turned to him, a faint smile trying to brighten her face. "I'm just thinking about everything. The exhibition, what people said, and, well, I feel like I'm not really the person who should be telling these stories." Mark furrowed his brow, looking at her with an intense gaze. "Why do you feel that way? You captured the essence of those people, their struggles and victories. You did it with an honesty that is rare. It's not every day someone takes that kind of risk. But what if I don't understand the depth of the experiences I portrayed?" Julia exclaimed, her voice trembling. "What do I know about the struggle for self-love and acceptance? I've always been privileged, Mark. I'm a photographer, but what if I'm just romanticizing other people's pain?" Mark leaned forward, his hands clasped together. "Julia, you don't need to have lived every pain to capture it. Sometimes, art is about empathy, about the ability to listen and reflect. You may not have gone through all of that, but you've heard the stories and brought them to life. That's powerful." She looked at him, seeking comfort in his eyes. "Do you really think so? That I can do this?" He nodded firmly. "Yes, absolutely. Your vulnerability is a strength. It's what makes your work authentic. People connect with you because you're real, because you care. Never underestimate the power of your voice." Julia took a deep breath, his words wrapping around her like a comforting cloak. Yet, a persistent unease troubled her. I just want to do justice to these stories. And now, with this anonymous message I received, I feel like everything might fall apart. Anonymous message? Mark questioned, his curiosity piqued. What did it say? It was just a warning, something about my past. I don't know what it means, she replied, shaking her head as if trying to brush away the fog clouding her thoughts. I just feel like I'm about to uncover something I might not want to know. Mark watched her for a moment, the concern on his face slowly transforming into determination. You're not alone, Julia. I'll be here, no matter what you find out. Everyone has their secrets, but that doesn't diminish the value of the stories you've already told. If you need to confront something from your past, I'll be by your side. She smiled, a glimmer of gratitude in her eyes. Thank you, Mark. That means a lot to me. Silence fell over them again as the sun began to set, painting the sky orange and pink. Julia felt a mix of anxiety and anticipation, as if she were on the brink of a revelation that could change everything. As she watched the golden light reflect off the leaves in the park, her phone vibrated in her pocket, breaking the tranquility of the moment. It was a message, a notification that made her shudder. With trembling hands, she opened the app and saw a simple message that made her heart race. You don't know the truth about your own story, Julia? Mark called, noticing her pale expression. What is it? She looked at him, the phone still in her hands. I received a message. Is it a threat? I don't know. It's just cryptic and it confuses me. Do you want me to take a look? He offered, reaching out his hand. No. I need to process this on my own, she replied, her tone a mix of determination and vulnerability. But, Mark, this person, who could it be? What do they mean by that? Maybe it's someone who knew you before, who knows something you don't remember, Mark suggested cautiously. But don't let this consume you. Focus on what you've already accomplished, on your art, on the stories you've been telling. That's what really matters. Julia nodded, but the unease wouldn't leave her. What if this keeps me from moving forward? What if I find out that everything I thought I knew about myself isn't true? I want you to know that no matter what you discover, you are more than your past. You are the sum of your experiences, but you are also the person who chooses what to do with those experiences in the present, Mark said, his voice firm and encouraging. She looked at him, absorbing every word. You're right. I need to face this, but sometimes fear is paralyzing. It's normal to feel afraid. What's important is not letting it control you. If you need me, I'll be here. Always, he assured her, a gentle smile on his lips. Julia smiled back, feeling a little stronger. Thank you, Mark. That really helps. She took a deep breath, trying to push away the uncertainties surrounding her. I think I need to go home and figure out what this means. If there really is a truth to be revealed, I want to know. Mark watched her as she stood up, determined. Then go, and don't forget. No matter what you discover, I'll be here with you. She nodded, grateful to have someone so supportive by her side. Julia walked home, her heart racing, not only from the fear of what she might discover, but also from the courage that was beginning to bloom within her. The path seemed clearer now, and even with the doubts and fears, there was a growing determination pushing her forward. Upon arriving home, Julia sat at her desk, the soft light of the lamp illuminating the space. With trembling hands, she picked up her phone again and decided to respond to the message. But before she could type, the phone rang, making her heart skip a beat. She hesitated, looking at the screen. An unknown call. With a surge of courage, she answered. Hello? Julia. The voice on the other end was familiar, a mix of nostalgia and a hint of tension. You don't know the truth about your own story. The world around her seemed to stop. She recognized the voice, an echo of a past she thought she had left behind, but that was now presenting itself again, in a blend of relief and terror. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice steady, but her heart racing. "I am someone who knows you better than you imagine," the voice replied, with an enigmatic tone. "And it's time for you to know the truth. There are secrets that have been hidden from you, secrets that shaped who you are." Julia felt a chill in her stomach, the words resonating like a warning. "What do you mean by that?" "Why now?" "Because you are ready. You need to understand your own story to move forward. To be the artist you were born to be," the voice insisted, as if trying to convince her of something she did not yet understand. I don't know if I'm ready." "What do you want from me?" she asked, anxiety growing. "I want you to listen, to discover. The truth may be painful, but it is liberating. And you don't have to face it alone," the voice said. And then, before Julia could respond, the call was disconnected. She stood there, the phone in her hands, the echo of the conversation reverberating in her mind. The truth about her story was closer than ever, and despite the fear surrounding her, there was a spark of hope. Julia knew she needed to face this, but she could not do it alone. With the strength Mark had given her, she felt ready to uncover what the past held for her, even if it meant digging up memories she would prefer to keep buried. It was time to unveil the secrets that shaped her life, and with each step toward the unknown, Julia felt she was closer to finding herself, to understanding who she truly was and who she wanted to be. The journey was just beginning.